Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Izabela Konwińska. Originally, I'm from Poland. Right now, I'm living in London. And for the past 5 years, I have been a hypnotherapist and regression therapist. I have been dealing with that. And finally, I have found something that's, after all those years of doing all things that didn't quite resonate with me, I have found something that I'm really passionate about. Let me just share my presentation with you now. Let's hope it's going to work. Okay. Right. So my presentation today is going to be about past life regression. Past life regression, that is actually a very special technique that is part of regression therapy that I do. And I'm trying to... I cannot change the slide now. That's weird.
If you use the right arrow?
Yes, I'm using the right arrow. Nothing is happening.
Maybe you want to get out and come back in?
Yes, let me just do that. No. So yes, when I took a look at the program today, there was this big question mark that came up in my head. How am I going to fit in today's presentations? Because all of them, I think most of them or all of them are about microbiotics. And my presentation, I feel like the odd one out. But then I came across this beautiful sentence on your website, Ginat, on the Rice House website, about the mission of the Cushing Institute, which is also your goal, to teach, guide, and inspire individuals towards greater personal freedom, health, happiness, and peace by the use of microbiotics. And then I was thinking, this is exactly what I do. This is exactly what regression therapy does. It guides and inspires individuals towards greater personal freedom, health, happiness, and peace, just from a different angle, just by doing it differently, going into the subconscious, and getting rid of the blockages that we all have. It's just, regression therapy is just a very effective way of doing shadow work. So what is regression therapy in a nutshell? So it's like regressing or going back to the source of the issue and transforming it at its source. So, of course, there are many different therapeutic techniques, right? And unfortunately, some of them just deal with the symptoms, right? So let's imagine we've got an anxious person with so-called generalized anxiety. So they are anxious, but they don't really know what they are anxious about. And some of the therapeutic modalities are going to deal with the symptom, with the anxiety, with alleviating the anxiety or with managing the anxiety, right? This is not what we do within regression therapy, because we go with the notion that if we go back to the source, if we discover the source of the issue, any emotional issue, right, and we transform it at a deep subconscious level, then the symptoms are going to disappear. And this is actually what usually happens, right? So somebody might ask, so why don't we just do it? Because it's just so logical. It sounds so easy, right? Why don't we do it? So we don't usually do it, especially within mainstream modalities, because talking about something that is hidden deeply in the subconscious from the conscious level is very ineffective. It takes ages, and sometimes even it's not really possible, right? Because most of the time, the source of our issues are deeply ingrained in our subconscious. So how do we do it within regression therapy? Within regression therapy, we utilize a beautiful state that is the state of deep relaxation, which is hypnotic trance, which is the same as the state that we reach in meditation. This is just this beautiful meditative state in which something magical happens and our mind begins to work in a different way, right? We somehow are able to bypass the rational mind, and we are able to access the memories that we have forgotten. We are able to connect to dots that in our conscious mind are totally separate thing, but now we understand that they are somehow connected. So we utilize this beautiful, deep, relaxed state in order to, as we say, follow the client's energy to the source of the problem, because it's actually the client or the client's subconscious that knows where the source of the issue is, right? So obviously regression therapy, there are different names, you know, there are different modalities and different approaches within regression therapy field. And fortunately, in 2006, I think, the Earth Association for Regression Therapy, this is the International Association for Regression Therapy, came into being, and they have come up with international standards. And this is really very good because I don't know if you know that regression therapy was quite popular in the 70s. And there were a lot of controversies around it, because it's a powerful tool, but you need to know how to do it, how to use it, not to harm the client, but to benefit the client, right? And what the Earth Association did, they came up with quite a few standards. I'm not going to go into details, but just about the most important ones. So one of the most important standards for doing regression therapy, in my view, is that a session is not just exploring our memories, our associations that we've got in our mind, but also transforming, right? So some regression therapists just explore past life, or just explore some memories from childhood. And it can be beneficial, because whatever we bring out from the unconscious to the conscious, of course, if we become conscious of something, it is going to be beneficial, but it is even more beneficial if we do proper transformation, also on a deep subconscious level. And we do this transformation with the use of all kinds of techniques. First of all, what we use is just what's it called? Active imagination, Jungian active imagination, right? And the imagination, of course, is a very powerful thing. And with the use of our imagination, we can actually introduce new, more beneficial programs, so to say, into our minds and energy. So both exploring and transforming is very, very important. Another important thing is that within the session, when the client is in this meditative state, we always ask just open questions. What happens next? What happens next? Are you inside or outside? And always it's the client who comes up with the answer, right? We never suggest anything, because it's the notion is to follow the client's energy. And another standard is about using various techniques. So everybody is different, everybody has got different needs, right? For some people, the source of the problem is going to be in childhood. For some people, the source of the problem is going to be in a past life. And for some people, the source of the problem is going to be something totally abstract, but we can also work with those abstract images and abstract symbols. So, as I said, past life regression is, I'll go back to the previous. So what we use, various techniques, depending on the individual client's needs, is current life regression, inner child work, past life regression is one of them, and also body therapy. So why past life regression? Somebody could ask, why do we bother? Other than, of course, for some people, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be an interesting experience, right? So but why do we bother? We could just go to the source of the issue in childhood, right? So there are a number of reasons, actually. One of them is that sometimes we have very strong resistance, and the resistance can be so strong, especially in case of traumatic experiences, then that we suppress those memories. We just forget, right? Or we remember, but we've got this very strong resistance going back there and talking about those experiences. And that's when past life regression can come in handy, because it's like, it's like peeling out those outer layers and making the client prepare to actually confront those more raw current life issues. So this is one of the instances when past life regression can be beneficial. Another one is, as I called it here, awareness of the source does not translate into healing. So let's imagine that somebody comes from a family where there was physical abuse. The person was beaten, right? The father or the mother, both of them were very overbearing, very despotic. And they can say, okay, I know why I'm anxious. I know why I'm depressed, because I come from this kind of family, right? Or from this kind of background. But the awareness of it doesn't necessarily translate into being able to function in a different way, into being able to react in a different way, right? And this is when past life regression, which is more symbolic, can come into can be very beneficial, right? And another case is, as I called it here, intangible source of the issue. So let's imagine that someone comes from a family where on paper everything was great. It was a great childhood, right? But somehow their needs weren't met. And it was more like, it was not so much about the things that happened, bad things that happened, it was more about the things that didn't happen. Like there was no mirroring, there was no deeper connection, the kind of connection that the child needed. And because that person doesn't have anything to, knows just this and doesn't have anything to compare it with, so to say, they might think, what's wrong with me? Yeah? I had perfect childhood. So that's when past life regression as well can come in handy and be this magnifying glass. That's why I put a magnifying glass here, because past life regression, the symbolic story, can be a magnifying glass that can help us to really pinpoint and gain the insight. Okay, so that's what was wrong. That's what I'm struggling with, right? So when it comes to past life regression, there can be at least two perspectives on this technique, right? One is going to be esoteric. So we really believe that those past lives are our past lives. So we're talking about karma, reincarnation, and this is our soul's journey. And the soul gathers those different experiences and kind of gets to know two sides of the coin, and experiences being a victim, but then in the other reincarnation experiences also being a perpetrator, and that's how we gain knowledge. So this is one perspective. Another perspective is more scientific, symbolic, is just treating those stories as very symbolic stories, as a symbolic story that our subconscious is giving us for us to be able to tackle the issue. And it really doesn't matter from the point of view of the therapy, it really doesn't matter which perspective is our perspective, right? Whether we believe in this is our past life, or we don't believe, it doesn't really matter, as long, of course, as there is some kind of openness. Yeah, because I had instances when people came and they were trying to persuade me that past lives are not real. If there is no openness, it's not going to work. But if you are skeptic but open, it can work beautifully. If somebody, and people sometimes ask me, do I believe in past lives? I would say that, of course, I usually answer, it doesn't matter. It matters what you believe in. But if I was to answer here, I would probably say that I'm somewhere in between. I think what happens during a session is that we somehow, because we are Quantum physics says we are one, we are everything, we have been everything. You know, there's this big recycling of consciousness and energy. And what I think is we just tap into the stories of life that perhaps really happened. It might not be our personal lives, but maybe our bits and pieces were somewhere there, you know, energetic bits and pieces. Who knows? Perhaps we will find out one day. Talking about those two perspectives on past lives, I think it would be worth to mention two very interesting characters. One of them was Ian Stevenson. He was an American psychiatrist who was the founder of Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia and investigated paranormal phenomena. And he investigated over 3,000 cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. And at the end of the research, he came to this conclusion that, yes, he strongly believes that apart from genetics and the environment we are brought up in, past lives might be the third element that strongly influences our lives, the way we function. And another interesting character is Brian Weiss. He's an American psychiatrist and hypnotherapist. And as many hypnotherapists, he has been using regression. And some time ago, he only used childhood regression until he had a very interesting and very difficult client called Catherine. This is probably not her real name, but this is how he called her in his books, Many Lives, Many Masters. I strongly recommend this book. Very, very interesting one. So there was this client called Catherine, and she came, and working with her was very, very difficult. She had lots of blockages, lots of phobias, you know. And there was one very lucky incident. At the beginning of one of the sessions, Brian Weiss instructed her, put her under into the hypnotic state, and instructed her to go to the very first time she experienced some kind of fear. And he forgot to say, in your life or in your childhood. He just said, go to the very first time you experienced this fear. And she spontaneously went into a story of a past life. And he went along with it. He followed her energy and started working on past life with her. And that was a big breakthrough for this lady. And she started healing very, very quickly. And this healing journey is described in the book, Many Lives, Many Masters. What can be addressed with past life regression, with regression therapy in general? Generally speaking, any emotional issue, right? Any emotional issue, anxiety, depression, repetitive patterns, you know, those situations when we've got a feeling that, oh, I seem to attract the same kind of romantic partner, let's say, or I seem to attract the same type of trouble all over and over again. There's always a reason, and the reason is usually deeply hidden in our subconscious. Triggered emotions, when we feel that our emotions are kind of too strong in the particular context, right? They get triggered, then it's a sign we need to kind of investigate into the real source of the emotion. Feeling stuck and uninspired. This is a big one, actually, because it sounds so wishy-washy, but you know, I think that all of us, perhaps most of us, know that sometimes we go through those phases in our lives when we just feel stuck and uninspired. And commonly, people just kind of explain it away and they say, well, this is life, this is how it is, you know. No, our life is supposed to be full of passion, full of enthusiasm. If we feel like this for a couple of days, that's fine. But if we feel like this, stuck and uninspired for a longer period of time, then it's really worth investigating what's kind of blocking us, where we are not in touch with ourselves, right? Relationship issues, obviously, and also unexplainable somatic symptoms. Because of course we go with the notion that we are, you know, holistically. We are one, our body, mind, emotion, everything. And especially in case when doctors say, we've got some kind of pain, for example, and doctors say, there's nothing wrong with you, everything is fine. Okay, but I've got this pain. So we can investigate through going into our subconscious and seeing where in the subconscious, where in our energy, where in our emotions, the source of the somatic symptom is. So what is the structure of a session, in case you wonder? A typical session takes about 2 hours. Of course, it can be different because everybody is different, but around 2 hours. And it begins with induction, because we need to kind of close down our eyes and go into this deep meditative state. And one way of doing it is just hypnotic induction, which is like guided meditation. And at the end of the guided meditation, I usually tell the client to either open a door or draw back the curtain or go through a mist behind which there is a past life that is the source of the particular issue, right? And once the client is over there, behind the mist, behind the door, we start interacting. I start asking very simple, open questions, and the client tells me the first thing that comes into their mind. And that's how we kind of follow the story. So then the second part is exploring the story, exploring the whole story of a past life. And you know, sometimes those stories are very intricate, very complicated. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's just literally one very strong, very symbolic scene, and we know what it's all about. We know what to work on, right? A very special moment within exploring the story is the moment of death, the death point in the past life. This is a very kind of spiritual moment when we leave this plane and go into the spirit realms. And many clients, and this is my experience as well, but many clients have reported that after a few past life regression, it's almost like their attitude towards death shifts. There is something like, you know, we kind of understand on a deep energetic level that death is just, we don't disappear, we don't cease to exist. It's almost like this beautiful liberating moment going into the light. And then when we go into during session, when we go into the lights in the spirit realms, we begin the transformation. And the transformation always begins with meeting our spirit guides. In other words, it's just our higher self. It's just this part of us that's deeply spiritual and knows ourselves on a very deep level. So this is how we begin transformation. And then one of the techniques that we use during transformation is meeting all the significant characters from the past life. First, we meet the good guides, so to say. We source all the good energy, everything that was between us, that's very empowering. And then we are ready to meet the perpetrators. And meeting the perpetrators, you know, when meeting the perpetrators, at the end, hopefully, this is the aim that we aim for, we reach the moment of forgiveness, or at least this sense of relief and this deep feeling, okay, I can let this person go. I understand it now, right? So this is the healing bit, one of the healing bits. This is the healing that we aim for. And then the last part of the session is just healing. It's just like finishing up the session in a lovely way with a waterfall of energy that washes away everything that we don't need anymore. And that's it. That's done. That's the session. Another thing that I didn't mention about induction, it can be hypnotic induction or it can be bridges. We can bridge into the session. What does it mean? For example, if a client comes to me and is very triggered already, I'm not going to put him under to then bring up the emotion again. I'm going to straight away use the emotion that he comes with, right? So I'm going to tell him, close your eyes and just tell me about the situation that happened that triggered your anger so much. And by focusing on anger, but going deep into the anger, but by almost bringing the anger up and making it stronger, we can bridge into the regression, into regressing into the past life. So it's interesting. It's almost like you know, the opposite thing that the thing that we usually do in our life, because in life, when we experience the strong emotion, we try to calm down instead of investigating what it is, what it is from, right? We try to calm down. Even when talking to friends, we say, just calm down, have a cup of tea, you know. So it's like we actually suppress, we actually push away those emotions instead of investigating them, which is probably quite a natural thing. But in regression, we do exactly the opposite to get to the root of the issue, right? Okay, case studies. I hope it's going to be interesting to get to know how 2 exemplary sessions went. One of them was a session of a guy who came to me, and he said that he's got this fear of public speaking. He needs to speak in public regularly at work, and he's got this icky feeling, you know. So when we investigated, yes, it's a fear. Okay, it's a fear of public speaking. All right. So we made an intention to go to a past life that is the source of the fear of public speaking. And he went into a past life of a Roman warrior. And it was an interesting one, because when we explored different events, he was just like, yeah, I don't know. I just know that I'm a Roman warrior. I'm a Roman warrior, you know. And it was just like this, you know. Okay, there's a woman, I like her. She's got a partner. There was not so much of a story. And this is a good illustration of the fact that, you know, people sometimes after reading, they have read books by Brian Weiss, books by Michael Newton, and they come and they expect the story to be like a Hollywood movie. So sometimes it is like a Hollywood movie, but sometimes it's not, right? And in this case, my client at a certain point, he just almost like stopped with his eyes closed. He stopped and he said, listen, I just know what's the most important here, right? The most important thing here is that there is this lady, I'm in love with her, she's got a partner, and I scheme and plot, and I cause this partner to die in a horrible way as a gladiator in the arena, whatever the story was. So that was it. We actually knew what was the most important in that life, and we could go on to the transformation part. And it was really interesting in the transformation, because when I asked him to meet the lady with whom he was in love, he saw her as very big and himself as very small. And he said, it's like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy to speak to her. So I was like, okay, what do we do? So I asked him, just ask your spirit guide what to do in this situation. What can you do to be able to speak to this lady? And he said, oh, I see an owl. I don't know how it is for you, but in the Polish culture, an owl is a symbol of wisdom. So he jumped to the conclusion, you know, he immediately drew the conclusion, okay, I need to go to school. So I was like, okay, just go to school. You know, this is a good illustration how we use the active imagination, right? Whatever client needs, just go to school and tell me what's happening in school. I'm sitting, I'm learning, you know, there's my spirit guide writing something on the blackboards, right? So I said, okay, just fast forward to the end of the year and just see what happens, right? And he was like, oh, it's really good. I get this certificate with a big fat A on it. I did really well. So I said, okay, so just go back to this lady and just see what happens now. And he said, okay, now we are the same size and we can talk to each other. And there was the whole conversation, you know, that took place. And actually the insight that he got from this session was that you cannot make anyone love you. You cannot make anyone like you. You can just present yourself as you are, and let the other person decide whether they are going to love you and like you, you know. And from the rational level, we could say, okay, yeah, it is like this. We all know this. But the characteristic thing about this work is it's not just knowing from the rational perspective. It's also embracing the insight emotionally and energetically, so that it really sinks in, right? So that was one of the case studies. The other one was a lady who came to me and she said, okay, I've got problem with sleeping, trouble sleeping, not so much with falling asleep, but with waking up. And very often, if I wake up, it doesn't happen every night, but if I wake up, I always wake up at 4:30. Right? So we were, okay, this is mysterious. Let's investigate. Let's see what happens, right? And she went into a story of a girl who was born, she was an extramarital child. She was the child of an aristocrat who had an affair with a servant. And the servant had a baby, this girl. And unfortunately, the mother died at the birth. So then the girl was just all alone. I mean, the father took care of her, sent her off to boarding school, but didn't connect with her on an emotional level. And the girl, at a certain point, quite early, she developed cancer. It was bone cancer. And when the father got to know about it, he took her into her home, but still she was in the room alone all the time. And when she died, she was just looking out of the window, and there was this bird in the tree, and that was her only companion. And it was just very, very lonely. And at the end of this life, I was like, because I was thinking, okay, what does it have to do with her waking up at 4:30 in the morning, right? So I asked her the question. This is a very good example of that sometimes, the therapist doesn't know, but the client knows, right? So I asked her the question, so, okay, what does this past life have to do with you waking up at 4:30? And she said, well, this is the time when I died of lack of love. So she knew straight away what was the link between the past life and the current life. And for this particular client, this session was almost like opening the possibility of healing, because she realized within this session, that also in current life, she misses connection, she misses love. There is a lack of love and connection with people. And she started working towards getting rid of all the blockages that were blocking her getting that connection and love. So this is a holistic method, and it's not just a word. It is really a holistic method, modality that treats us as a totality. It involves mind, emotions, body, soul. When it comes to mind, it's kind of minimized, but we do address the mind as well, because from a cognitive level, we need to understand what's going on in the session and what the insights are. So I would say that the mind is involved before the session and after the session, a little bit at the end of the session as well. But before the session, when we talk about the problem, and after the session, when we kind of draw conclusions that the client can incorporate into their lives. Emotions, yes, we work with emotions, and very often, I talking to clients for the first time, I made them aware that this is the work within which we can go sometimes, not always, but sometimes we can go to very deep, dark places in order to be able to really find that source of issue and heal it. How the body is involved. I have mentioned before the body therapy, which is one of the parts of regression therapy. And this is a beautiful, beautiful thing, because it's very quick. It allows us to quickly get rid of or release stuck energy in the body. I'll give you an example. For example, if a person lands, so to say, in a scene where they're being attacked by someone quite unexpectedly, and in the past life or current life, they were not able to defend themselves, then I ask the body, what do you need to do what you couldn't do back then? And the body answers, let's say, I need to push away the perpetrator, right? So what we do in our imagination, we go to animal kingdom, we select the animal whose energy is going to help the client to push away the perpetrator. In this way, we anchor this energy in the client, thus empowering him or her. And then we go back to the situation, and I say, okay, on the count of 3, on the count of 1, you're going to be back in this situation with the energy of this animal, and on the count of three, you're going to push away the perpetrator. And what I do, I actually come with a cushion. Of course, the client always knows something like this is going to happen. This is not a surprise, right? I come with a cushion, and the client really actually has got an opportunity to use the physical strength, power, and push away whomever they need to push away. And it's a very, very quick way of releasing stuck energy, the energy of the trauma from the body. And finally, soul. I think that I strongly feel that the spiritual dimension of this method, of this modality, is something that makes it very, very special. And as I said, in the transformation, we meet our spirit guide, which is our higher self. In past life regression, we go through the moment of death and going to the spirit realms, experiencing those liberating emotions. And also one very interesting technique that we use in the transformation is getting to know the soul contracts. So if we have got perpetrated, if we had a perpetrator in the past life, we explore what was the soul contract that both our souls agreed on. And just this knowing, just this awareness that it was actually our soul's journey, it was actually our soul's decision to experience it, is also very liberating. I think I'm more or less finished. Here are the links. There's the link to my website if anybody is interested. And also, I would like to recommend to you, if this topic sparks interest, I would very strongly recommend a film that is available on YouTube. It's called Why Regression Therapy, and it's made by the Earth Society Association. It's in my opinion, it's a very interesting movie. That's exactly the movie that inspired me to start learning and do the course in regression therapy. And yeah, I think it's very inspiring. So that's it from me. And if anyone has got a questions, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much.
So of course I have a question.
Yeah.
I take the opportunity to jump in quick. I did a therapy with you. Thank you very much. And I've done some other ones. And part of me is can easily respond to suggestions and follow directions and feel myself, whatever. And there's part of me at the same time is saying, yeah, right. I don't have to really answer. I mean, I'm answering because I'm a good girl. And I could just as well not. Does that make sense to you? It's like,
what is the other part that doesn't want to answer? Do you know why it doesn't want to answer?
Well, it's some resistance or some
resistance. Yeah.
Better than or
yeah.
I know better.
Well, my answer to that is that resistance. There's always in every healing process, in every therapy healing process, there's always a resistance, and we need to accept it and we need to work with it, right? And also, I think that because we did one session together, and I think in my experience, what happens is that the first session might be for some people might be a bit difficult because they need to develop trust both towards me as a therapist, but also towards the process, right? And once they have experienced one session or two sessions, or sometimes 3 sessions, and they kind of know how the process goes, and they start seeing some therapeutic benefits, they open up more and more. So this resistance just goes gradually, I would say.
Well, thank you. That's good. I'll just check the chat and see. Thank you, Izabela. Do you do this via Zoom? Yeah.
I do actually. Yes. Sometimes there are instances when there are contraindicators when I speak to the client, you know, when I do the interview, and I see that people are very emotionally dysregulated, then there is the contraindicator. But in more normal cases, so to say, absolutely, it can be done on Zoom. This is how we did it with
Because you and I.
Yeah.
I have a question. How do you work? How do you test that the story that is told you when you ask for what's going on? How do you get the proof? Do you have any methods to prove what's going on? Like kinesiology or something where you can, you know, see that this is not a story made up for some reason, that is really the true source you're getting to?
So my answer would be, we are not so much, from the point of view of therapy, we are not so much concerned whether it's true or not, because what we are concerned with is, this is the emotional truth for the client, right? So when talking about past life, was it really your past life or not? We don't know, right? But we are interested in the therapeutic benefits, right? This is your kind of, you know, this is your emotional reality. This is, you know, the emotions are real. You can see it, you can feel it. So you can just feel the energy.
Yes, thank you. And in any case, the therapist, wouldn't put a story on the client. It would always be something that is extracted from what the client is exploring.
Exactly. This is a very good point. Yes, and then this is, you know, what I said, then we always follow the client's energy and never suggest anything. This is very important. So when we ask questions, whenever we ask questions like, when we do past life regression, we ask questions like, are you a man or a woman? Are you old or young? Are you inside or outside? And it's the client who comes up with the answer, right? And when it comes to, it's kind of interesting when it comes to current life regression, you know, because current life is a different story. And yes, we can encounter those situations in which we're going to have this big question mark. Is it true? Or am I just making it up, right? So, you know, when the client opens up their eyes after the session and is puzzled because they seem to remember something that they didn't remember before, you know, and is like asking me question, is it really true? My answer is going to be, I don't know. And unfortunately, I am not the one to tell you. It's up to you to decide. All I can say is, this is your emotional reality. This is how you, I'm not saying this happened, but this is how you felt at a certain point, right? And this is what we are working with, actually.
And then might be in the next session or another session that is following, that the story changes. The emotional exploration can continue. It can be a process, right?
Yes, absolutely. It can be a process. Yeah. With current life, I haven't experienced even one instance in which the story would change. Yeah, the story stays the same. We get to know more, so to say. Yeah, with the past life, actually, it's quite interesting, because one of the techniques that we use in the transformation is called reframing. So after all the work that we do, after meeting all the characters, you know, and after all the forgiving that we do, we take all those insights and all those strengths and we go back to the past life. And I always ask a question, okay, and how this past life now could be different? And then a totally different story unfolds, the more positive story. And this is where the healing happens. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
Norio, you wanted to speak?
Yeah. Thank you, Izabela. Anyway, my parents always emphasize food. It as though handles everything, so to speak. And I always, I didn't argue, but I would always question them throughout my life about that. That there are other things like what you're presenting that are really, really useful and helpful, you know, in our journey. You know, so
thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and so you made a comment regarding pain or resistance, I guess it was that you said. And what I found with regard to the resistance or pain that I've encountered going through life is that it's not the pain or suffering is I discovered is that it's not the story that creates the pain of this. It's the resistance to the story.
Yes.
And when we can really look at the story when we can understand the pain and just look at the pain without the story, then the story no longer is something that we can't, it's no longer something that is to avoid.
Yes.
You know, and you know, like for example, like as I grew older and became a young adult, I noticed at times when I would cry, you know, like something, you know, it would occur, and I would, you know, I would try not to cry, but then, you know, the emotion to cry was overwhelming, and I would cry, and anytime that occurred, there was this burning in my lungs, and so after this happened a number of times, as this was occurring, I remembered when I was a child that I would cry, you know, many times in different circumstances I would cry, but there was never any burning in my lungs. So so immediately I got curious. And then, so as soon as I remember that as a child, there was no burning when I cried, but now all of a sudden I saw myself in the living room when I was 10 years old, under this table, this coffee table. My parents were there, my grandparents were there, and I was really upset and crying underneath this coffee table. And there was all this attention on me, and I felt really ashamed that I was crying, you know, to be crying. And I remember thinking to myself at that time, I'm never going to cry again. And once I saw that, I said, oh, that's a crazy thing to think. There's nothing wrong with crying.
Yes.
And so after that, then now I can cry and it doesn't burn at all. It feels actually feels, you know, there's a release, a nice release from the crying.
Yes.
So I recognize the resistance it's not the story. It's not that there's something wrong with the crying or anything like that. It's the resistance. And when I saw that, when I recognized that resistance wasn't there before, it was then the memories associated with that just came up from the subconscious to the conscious. And it was you know, I was able to see there was a deep recognition and understanding.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's a very interesting example of spontaneous regression that you did, right? You just, you went into the pain, and there was this memory that came up, and once the memory came up, you could let go of the pain. So that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and my mother, when I was a small child, when I was 4 years old, told me to follow my feelings. And what that really means, another way of putting it, is to follow your heart, and not the intellect. And so that's, and I understood completely what she meant, because that's the way she lived. So that that really, I feel that I was blessed to be able to navigate life that way. Although, of course, intellect is so, we're conditioned to really focus on intellect in our society today, in our culture today. And so, of course, I couldn't avoid, being fixated on that as well. At the same time, I never lost the feeling sensation. And there's so much that reveals itself when we follow the feelings.
Absolutely.
How
lucky you were that you had a mother who taught you something like that. Follow your heart.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in that case, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And you really took us away from our sometimes narrow box that we can call macrobiotics, peas and carrots or whatever, that's, it's such a big question. Everyone's doing their hair today. Okay. Thank you very much, Izabela.
Somebody wants to talk. There is a hand up.
Michelle wants to ask a question.
If I have time, I'll just be quick. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So I have to say that yeah, I need to do the same. My hair, though. but there's a very it addresses trauma. It's called the REM, Rapid Eye Movement. There's now a psychologist, or I don't know if he's a psychiatrist. I hope he's a psychologist. Anyway, who's now doing further studies because of the past life regressions he's coming upon. So now he has another group. I don't know the name, but I was interested in that. So I just wanted to put it out there that, practitioners are coming upon past life regressions. So yeah, very interesting that you talked today. Thank you. And I've always been interested in past life regressions. And I just have to say that when I've had blockages in the past from trauma, that I always read, so I could find this one sentence that would give me permission to do something like crying, for instance, because I was like, oh, I can't do that. And then I'd read, it's a natural thing women should do twice a month to be healthy. And I'd be like, okay, now I can cry. So many blockages here. And not to mention, eating an Impossible Whopper last night, I am so filled with sodium. I can't, the blockages are everywhere. I'm puffing out. So anyway, so mistake made. But thank you, very interesting.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And thank you once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.